Hi, my name is Peter Andras. I'm professor at Edinburgh Napier University. This is my lecture series on the evolution of complex systems. This is lecture 11, Advanced Concepts. This is part of 2 of lecture 11. So in the previous part, we looked at some of the concepts about abstract communication systems that we could identify in the context of the systems that we considered previously. Now we continue this and we look at how systems compete, how they get selected in particular environments, and we will look at how new kinds of systems emerge from other systems through interpenetration of systems, through multi-instance systems, and through composite systems. And finally, we will discuss further the evolution of systems. So, as we discussed earlier, the environment of the systems is considered to be infinitely complex because there are all kinds of communications outside of the system. And in principle, there are infinitely many kinds and complexly organized communications. Now, the system itself is communicating about itself, describing itself, so it's communication. And in a complementary sense, this description of itself also provides a model of the environment. Now, if you look at the system actions and perceptions, what you see is that the system has a model of the environment, which is the system's model of itself, the system's own description in a complementary sense. Now, the communications that the system is built of, these reference other communications, providing reference for further communications. And in this way, the communications generate further communications, recreating or maintaining the system. Now, these communications lead to changes in the environment by changing the behavior of the communication units, and these behaviors have impact on the environment. Either directly, the communications that are generated within the system, or indirectly by altering the other communications that these communication units participate in. In the same way, the changes in the environment lead to changes in the system communications by altering how the communication units behave, and in this way they provide the basis for the perceptions of the system. So the system has a model of itself. That model is seen in a complementary sense as the model of the environment. And relative to this model, the system produces actions that impact on the environment, which reference this model. And they also produce communications which represent the perception of the system about its environment and relative to the model of the system about its environment. Now, the system is reproducible or sustainable if it can produce actions such that these actions impact the environment by producing changes in the environment which facilitate the expansion of the system. And also it can expand and reproduce itself, it is sustainable, if the perceptions about the environment are such that these lead to the appropriate actions which induce the changes in the environment which allow the expansion of the system. So, to give you an example, if you have a company which sells, let's say, cars, they produce cars which are sold to their customers. Now, by selling these cars to their customers, they have an impact on their environment because there will be reports about the performance of their cars, all kinds of features about how they serve the customers and so on. And these impacts on the environment lead to further communications between communication units in the environment, other humans who are not part of the company. And If the impact on the environment is the right kind, then these communications will lead to further customers buying their products, their cars. That will lead to further expansion of the company, so the company is reproducible and sustainable. Of course, these also depend on the perception of this company about the environment, about its social environment, what kind of cars are needed to be sold to their customers. And both the perceptions and the actions reference the model of the company about itself, and in a complementary way about their environment. The same way it applies to biological systems. So if you think of a cell, let's say a bacterium, they produce all kinds of molecules that they release into their environment. The expectation, for example, toxins which kill other bacteria or other cells in general. The expectation of these actions on the environment is that they lead to the production of nutrients in some direct or indirect way. For example, by killing another cell which releases its contents, and then the bacterium can suck up the appropriate molecules from the environment. In the same way, the bacterium also senses the environment. And sensing the environment, for example, the lack of nutrients or the presence of a certain kind of other cell in the environment, leads to the selection of appropriate actions which are expected to impact on the environment to facilitate the maintenance and reproduction and expansion of this bacteria. So, in a sense, the system's description of the environment allows the good predictions about the environment to reproduce and expand the system. So if the system's description of itself, and in the complementary sense, the description of its environment is such that it can make good perceptions about the environment, which lead to good actions on the environment, overall good predictions about its environment, then it can reproduce and expand. So this is what we term predictive sustainability of the system. So the system is sustainable and reproducible in a predictive manner if it has a model of the environment which can support the production of the right perceptions and right actions which lead to the interaction with the environment such that these interactions facilitate the reproduction and sustainability of the system. Now, there are many systems in the environment. All these communications, as I said, are in the environment. They are produced by other systems of all kinds. So these systems in the environment compete with each other. Each of the systems have their predictions about the environment using the actions and perceptions of the system, and are based on the model of the system about themselves and about their environment. However, the systems have different level of predictive sustainability depending on their environment and depending on the fit between their model of the environment and their actual environment. Now, the ones with better predictive sustainability will be able to track more communications to themselves, or if like more communication units to produce communications that are part of the system. Or they will do this more easily than the system with less predictive sustainability. So again, to give you an example, if you consider two kinds of bacteria competing for the resources in their environment, the one which fits better the environment will be able to reproduce easier. So, for example, if the environment includes some antibiotics, the bacteria which can deal with the neutralization of antibacterial molecules will have a better model of their environment, and they will be able to outcompete the other bacteria which do not have this ability. Or if you look at car companies, the one which has a better model of their mind, better understanding of what their potential clients are looking for in terms of cars, which have better production facilities, which produce cars with less problems, which are more reliable. This company will outcompete the other because they have a better predictive sustainability in that particular environment. So within an environment, there are selection pressures on the systems that exist in that environment. And these selection pressures drive which are the systems which have better predictive sustainability in this particular environment. So these selection pressures are the features of the environment. So for example, in the case of the car companies, the selection pressures are the tastes of the customers. What kind of cars are they looking for? So for example, more recently, there is a significant change towards electric cars. So companies which produce electric cars or hybrid cars, which are more environmentally friendly, get a better reception in their social environment. In the same way, in biological systems, the presence of certain kinds of nutrients or certain kinds of toxins influences the growth of unicellular organisms in that particular environment. So overall, the systems with better predictive sustainability are selected by the environment through these selection pressures, and these systems can outcompete others, are more able to reproduce themselves, to generate the communications that are required for the maintenance of the system than the other systems which have less good predictive sustainability in that particular environment. So, we discussed about systems. We noted that the ones which have memory can expand more than the systems without memory, because these systems can reference more directly without long chain of referencing communications from the past of the system. We said that systems undergo simplification and expansion, and those which do this, where first the lexicon is simplified, the grammar expanded, and then the system expands through this simplification and expansion by reducing the likelihood of errors in the system communications and the likelihood of wrong references. These systems can capture, again, a larger part of the environment, can describe the environment better. So they have better ability to select the right actions and generate the right perceptions about the environment. So in general, the longer descriptions about the environment make better predictions, and the better predictions may more likely the selection by the environment. So by having longer descriptions, they have better predictive sustainability, and in the particular environment, the environmental pressures lead to the selection of these systems. Now, moving on to look at how systems generate other systems. What we can see is that the communication units produce communications that are part of multiple systems, at least in principle. That does not apply to all communication units, but at least some of the communication units produce communications that are part of multiple systems. So for example, if you consider a human, they may work in the company, so they produce their professional communications, and they are also part of their family, where they produce family communications, and they might be also part of a voluntary organization, where they produce communications about the environment and reduction of the carbon footprint. But the same applies in biological systems as well. Now, the system communications, as they are generated, have an impact on the communication units. And these impacts affect how these communication units produce communications in other communication systems as well. So in this way, Communication units participating in multiple communication systems impact the communications generated in all these communication systems. So, for example, if the person has a family communication system where they get stressed, that will have an impact on their professional communications as well when they work in the company. For example, they make more mistakes, they forget things. So the systems impact on each other by using the same communication units for multiple systems. Now, it's said that the communication units are not part of the systems, and the systems are made up of communications between these communication units. And how we define the system is that there is a dense, rare communication density boundary in the sense of referencing. So there are frequent references within the system and very much less frequent references with outside of the system. However, the systems also reference communications which are not part of the systems. And these are part of the other systems. So when the company sells cars to their clients, they reference communications that happens between the client and other people, for example, members of their family or their friends. This referencing happens by the communications with the client or potential client, and ultimately by that communication which represents the selling of the car to this client. In the same way, you may look at molecules which are released from one cell and impact on another cell. You get, for example, neurons and the neurotransmitters. And then these molecules may be retaken by the releasing cell, so they further impact on the releasing cell. So you have many cases where system communications reference communications which happen in another system. Now, the number of references to communications to communications of these various systems may change. So one communication unit may generate communications which reference mainly communications from one system, but as time passes, that changes, and most of their communications now may reference another system. So in this way, the communications may belong to more than one system in the sense of providing references for system communications. And one system may dominate the communication of a communication unit, and the dominant system may change over time, as I noted. So, to give you an example, for example, people vote at elections. And they communicate with their friends about political communications. Occasionally they may communicate with politicians as well. And sometimes they change their preference. So when it comes to the voting, while previously they might have voted for this one party, now they may change to vote with another party. So the communications that they are participating in generating may change the frequency of referencing from one kind of party communications to another party communications. So what we see here is that we have two or possibly more systems which use a partial overlapping set of communication units. And each system influences the communication unit behavior, and in this way, it influences the communications in the other system. So it works both ways. Sometimes System 1 communications reference System 2 communications, and sometimes System 2 communications reference System 1 communications. However, as these references happen, the system also adapts, and if the referencing of System 1 communications are such that actually following System 1 referencing rules leads to more frequent continuation, more frequent occasions where more communications can be generated. Then the System 1 continuation distributions impact on how in System 2 the continuation distributions are used. So in effect, new continuation distributions may emerge in System 2 as a result of this interaction between the two systems. So, for example, if you consider politics and education, now clearly politics has an impact on education. For example, look at teaching of evolution in education. Going back 100 years, evolution was not seen necessarily as an established scientific theory. However, over time, that changed, and partly the impact that led to this change is politics, where the way how the school system is organized and it's working has been reorganized, facilitating more impact of science in the education compared to impact of the religion. But in the same way, politics is changing as an impact of the education system. So, for example, more social liberal attitudes, which are supported by more science-driven education, lead to kind of political discourse which moves towards a more social liberal attitudes across the society, which impacts on the politics, on the political parties, on their message to their voters, because they are aiming to convince their voters to stay with them and to vote for them. So overall, the educational system has an impact on the political system by changing the voter behavior and then indirectly and in effect changing the programs, offerings of the political parties. So what you see is that there is a dense cluster of frequently interreferencing communications between the communication units at the interface of these systems. And if you have this dense cluster of referencing, then you have a system. So by referencing the other system communications, you get this cluster of communications which reference each other and follow a mixture of referencing and continuation rules from the two systems. Now, when the questioning of the identity or the existence of this communication cluster happens, that's the point when this question leads to the formation of rules and shaping of rules of potential distributions, which are specific for this particular cluster. So a subsystem may emerge as an institution system from this grouping of the structure rules. And when the identity of this cluster is questioned, then you are in this double contingency situation where the existence of the system is, depends on its environment, on the difference between the system and its environment. And the environment depends on the systems. And the question of the system, questioning the system's existence, whether it is truly different from its environment, whether it is truly existing, whether it has its own rules and language, that leads to the further extension of the system and the definition of this system. So where the systems are interpenetrating, they modify each other communication continuation rules. And the communications reference the rules from both systems, and by doing this dense cluster and sharpening the rules within this dense cluster, you get to the emergence of a dense cluster referencing, and questioning the existence of this cluster as a system leads to the growth of this and the identity definition of a new system on the boundary of these interpenetrating systems. So on the interface between these two systems which are interpenetrating, influencing the communications within each other, the new system emerges by questioning the existence of this new system with a mixture of the referencing and continuation rules of the two systems. So, for example, if you consider biology and mathematics, there have been communications in science of biology, which about how biological organisms are organized, behave, and so on. Similarly, there were many communications in mathematics. However, there were scientists who were able to communicate both in mathematics and biology given their training and interests. And they developed a kind of interface between these two science areas where mathematical concepts are mixed with biological concepts, and the two sciences join together on this interface area, developing what we call theoretical biology, which applies mathematical concepts to the interpretation and analysis of biological concepts, and then also derives concepts which are useful for mathematics and for biology as well. Or if you look at neuroscience and pharmacology, again, one is about how the brain and nervous system works, the other about how drugs work, how drug molecules work. And that led to the emergence of the area of field of neuropharmacology, which is about, in particular, how pharmacological molecules work in the context of the neural system. Or another example is if you look at the interface between the media and hospitals. So clearly, the media reports about hospitals, what happens in hospitals. The hospitals respond to what happens in the media. And that leads to the emergence of the healthcare public relations, which is a particular area of public relations which specializes in communicating about hospitals and specializes in communicating with the media. So it is emerging on the interface between the systems of the media and of the hospitals, and it is a particular kind of system with its own specific hospital-specific PR language. Now, another aspect of systems, how new systems emerge, is if you look at systems which have multiple instances. So the system language, in this case, have appropriate constraints to define the so-called unit system. So this unit system implements all the rules and follows all the rules of the system and generates communications belonging to the system, but it has a boundary. And you have multiple units of the same kind which generate within their boundary the communications that belong to the system. Now, in these systems which have this ability to define their unit systems, which reproduce in a kind of spatial-temporal localized way communications belonging to a system, these can expand by generating multiple copies of these unit systems, each encapsulating a localized version of the system. So, for example, if you look at bacterial cells, each bacterial cell belonging to the same bacterial species generates the same kind of molecular interactions within the particular cell. But across all bacterial cells belonging to the same bacterial species, the same kind of molecular interactions are generated. So they all represent the same bacterial cell system, although in different instances, but across all instances, the same system is represented. Or in context of social systems, you may think of supermarket instances, let's say Tesco, which you find in many cities. They all follow the same patterns, they're all organized according to the same rules, and they all represent the same supermarket company operating in the same way. And the system can expand by creating new supermarket instances, which again will operate according to the rules of the system, of that supermarket company system. So through having these multiple instances, the system can expand, and the system can be viewed as the sum of all these multiple instances, because all the communications within these multiple instances follow the communication rules of the system. So, if you like, this is a parent system with a number of instances, unit system instances, which all represent the same system. Now, the unit instances of the system may terminate after some time by disintegration, for example, after experiencing too many faults and errors in that localized copy of the system. However, there are many other copies of the system which survive, so the system overall survives and reproduces and expands itself. So the system can be seen over time and over space as the sum of all instances existing over time and over space. Now, while the system instances, the unit systems, have a limited lifespan, overall the whole system, which is seen as the sum of all these unit instances across time and space, maintains itself and exists through these multiple instances over time and space. Now, if you consider a system with multiple instances of unit systems, of course you can have also interactions between these unit systems, where one unit system's communications reference communications from another unit system. So, for example, if you consider the biofilm formed by bacteria, where each bacteria is a unit system of the bacterial system, each bacteria produces the same kinds of molecular interactions, but they also interact between them within the biofilm because they are close to each other. And their interactions happen by release of molecules which impact on molecular interactions in the other bacteria. So, for example, if bacteria are exposed to antibiotics, they may form biofilms in order to resist the negative impact of the antibiotic on them. And they may share resources across the biofilm that they form. Now, we can see these unit systems as communication units, and the interactions between them as communications between these abstract communication units, which are the unit system of another system. So, if you have many interactions between the unit systems, then you may develop a system of these interactions, where the original unit systems are the communication units, and their interactions form now the communications within a composite system. So the composite system is a communication system of the interactions between the unit system of another system. So if you think of a multicellular organism, each cell of the multicellular organism is a cell of the same organism. They generate the same kind of molecular interactions. They have the same DNA, they have the same kind of RNAs, they have the same kind of proteins, which follow the same kind of interaction, molecular interactions. Now, these cells interact with each other by exposing molecules, by releasing molecules, so in generating cellular behaviors that impact on other cells. And the multicellular organism is seen as the composite system, which is made of the interactions between the cells, where the cells are unit systems of the molecular interaction systems, which describes how the molecular interactions happen within the cells. So, we have seen now how systems compete within their environment, how this predictive sustainability of systems characterizes their match with their environment, and those which have better predictive sustainability outcompete others. And we have seen ways of improving predictive sustainability and also ways of generating new systems out of existing systems by having interface systems between interpenetrating systems, by having unit systems, and by having systems of unit systems where the unit systems of another system act as communication units of the new system. So let's have a look at overall how evolution of systems happens. So in general, what we said is that the systems recreate themselves or maintain themselves and expand themselves by generating new communications and recruiting new communications as references from their environment. Now, they interact with other systems, and through interaction with other systems, they change their rules, they change their boundaries, and they change ultimately their identity. So, as the systems interact with other systems, they experience identity violations. They experience that their predictions about the environment are not as good as their expectations are about these, and these lead to adaptations which change their rules. As they grow and change their rules, their boundaries change as well, and ultimately their identity may change as well. So to give you an example, Nokia is a well-known company. The company started a long time ago and originally produced rubber boots. Then the company changed. They moved into wood products and forestry because they realized that there was more business in that. The company could grow more. Then they moved into the production of radios and TVs by the 1950s, 1960s. The company which started as a rubber boot production company now was producing electronics equipment, TVs and radios. And by the 90s, they were focusing on mobile phones. And they were one of the biggest mobile phone companies until the early 2000s. And when they saw that they lost the competition with smartphones, they transformed again themselves. And they became a network management company which builds computer network hardware and software, which manages a large computer network, including mobile networks. So overall, over about more than 100 years, maybe 150 years, the company transformed multiple times, changing their rules, how they work, by adapting to their environment, looking at their growth opportunities, changing their boundaries, changing which part of the economy they work in, and effectively changing their identity from a company which produced rubber boots to a company which produced TVs, and then a company which produced mobile phones, and then a company which produces network gear. Now, systems develop structures. These structures are the constraints on their communications. And these structures may organize into institutions and institution subsystems, ultimately by questioning the identity of this subsystem. Now, This may lead to simplifications within the system because of the constraints of the communications. However, these simplifications make the communications more reliable. Also, they help the increase of the lengths of referencing sequences, which are non-random, helping the improvement of the predictions of the system about their environment. So ultimately, this simplification triggers the expansion of the system. Now, at the interface of systems, new dense communications clusters may emerge. And by the questioning of the identity of the existence of these new clusters, a new interface system may emerge at the interface of other systems. And the systems, as we discussed, may expand by introducing further constraints which define the units of the system. These unit systems act as effective systems in kind of spatial temporal localized version of the system. In part of the environment, the unit system replicates itself, and the system replicates by generating new unit systems. We noted that some of the unit systems may get dissolved because they experience too many identity violations. However, the system overall maintains itself by generating furthermore unit systems which maintain the system itself. And then we said that unit systems of a system that replicates through unit systems may act as communication units for a composite system, where the composite system emerges from the communications or the interactions between the unit systems of another system. And in this way, the unit systems generate a composite system. Now, the systems, as we said, compete for the communications that happen between the communication needs. The competition happens in terms of referencing these and the incorporation of these communications within the systems. Now, the systems describe the environment by describing themselves, having the model of the system in itself, which is provided by the identity definitions of system of the system. This description of the system provides the complementary model of the environment, which is effectively a prediction about the environment, which drives the actions and perceptions of the system. Now, the systems which have better predictions, they have better predictive sustainability, and under certain environmental pressures, they may get selected depending on how their sustainability and predictions fit with these particular environmental pressures. In fact, they are more easily reproducing and expanding than other systems which are which have less predictive sustainability. So if you think of organisms, for example, some organisms may fit, some animals or some plants may fit a particular environmental niche better than others. If the environment is more arid or colder or wetter or more saline, certain animals and plants fit those particular environmental conditions. In effect, they predict their environment better. They are more able to use the resources available in the environment to maintain and grow themselves. And in this way, they outcompete other animals or plants species which have less good predictive sustainability in that particular environment. Now, this outcompeting doesn't necessarily mean that the less fit system disappears from the environment. It only means that the better fitting system is expanding better, quicker, However, the environment might be such that many systems survive. In fact, that is most commonly the case. However, in some environments, you see much fiercer competition. So, for example, if you look at companies acting on the internet, especially in areas where having a large network of humans involved as customers with a company, like in social media companies, what you see is that only very few companies are able to retain their presence in a very competitive environment. The companies which fit better with their social environment, which offer better services, which are effectively based on being able to better model themselves and their environment, and have better perceptions and actions relative to the environment to generate more communications with their potential clients. So overall, the systems maintain and recreate themselves through their maintenance and expand and change. And there are new systems and subsystems which are emerging through the methods that we noted, like the interface systems, the units systems, and the composite systems. And overall, the systems compete in their environment on the basis of their predictive sustainability in that particular environmental context. And some are selected on the environmental pressures which have better predictive sustainability in that particular environment. However, this selection, as we noted, doesn't necessarily mean the elimination of all other systems, although in some cases that might be effectively the case. So, to summarize overall, we discussed about predictive sustainability and selection of systems, and we said that those systems which have a better model of themselves, better model of their environment, generate better perceptions and actions in the context of their environment, and are more able to maintain themselves and grow themselves. Then we discussed about the changing system boundaries because of the participation of communication units in multiple systems, and the interpenetration of systems as the boundaries change, in particular the emergence of new systems on the interface of the boundary of interpenetrating systems. Then we discussed about systems with multiple instances, which have constraints which facilitate the production of unit systems, which generate all the system interactions and communications within them, but the system exists in multiple instances of the system, and while some instances may get disbanded because they experience locally too many faults, failures, and errors, the system itself maintains itself through the multiple instances across time and space. And then we discussed about the composite systems, which use the interactions between instances of systems with unit systems as communications, and unit system instances as communication units. We discussed about the double contingency and how this leads to the emergence of the systems by questioning the existence of the system in the context of their environment. And finally, we discussed the evolution of systems, how systems change, adapt to their environment, adapt to pressures from the environment, and adapt to the impact of other systems, change their identity, and lead to the emergence of new systems as well. Let's see a few questions and answers. Is it true that system communications can be viewed as predictions about the environment? Well, overall, not necessarily all system communications. However, those system communications which are about perceptions of the environment and those which lead to actions on the environment can be seen as predictions about the environment. In an abstract sense, all communications reference within the system these perceptions and actions. However, not all communications are part of the generation of perceptions and actions of the system. Next question. Is it true that a system's ability to reproduce and expand in an environment depends on the system's predictive sustainability? And yes, that's how we define predictive sustainability. So this is the ability of the system to make good fitting predictions in their environment, to generate the right kind of perceptions and right kind of actions, which are such that facilitate the growth and maintenance of the system within their environment. So indeed, that means that the system's ability to grow and maintain themselves in their environment depends on their predictive sustainability. Third question, is it true that selection pressures favor systems with richer symbol sets? Well, in general, what we said is that richer symbol sets lead to shorter referencing sequences, shorter descriptions of the environment. So in general, these systems are more likely to have simpler descriptions of the environment, capturing less of the complexity of the environment and fitting less well into their environment than other systems which have more simplified symbol sets but more complex grammar, which allows them to generate longer sequences of referencing and a better, more precise prediction of their environment. Next question. Is it true that interpenetration means that systems change their boundaries as a result of the interaction between the systems? And indeed, this is the case. So interpenetration between the systems means that communications in one system reference communications from the other system. And the rules of referencing and rules of continuation on this boundary change. Mixing the two systems and questioning the existence of a system at this boundary, which leads to an expansion of a system at their boundary, at the interface between the two systems. Now, clearly, this growth of the interface system will change the boundaries of these systems. It may lead to the growth of both systems. But definitely will change the boundaries of the systems, while at the same time it may also lead to shrinking of the original systems. Next question, is it true that new systems always emerge at the interface of systems? And well, the answer is no. Systems may emerge at the interface of systems, but they do not necessarily emerge. It is possible that interface is there. There is cross-referencing across the systems, but this cross-referencing never gets to the point where it is frequent enough, where there is sufficient specific structure emerging there to define ultimately a subsystem which questions itself and possibly becomes a separate system from the interfaces. So the answer is no. Next question, can systems grow by generating multiple copies of a unit system? And the answer is yes, as you can see, for example, in multicellular systems or in bacteria and generally all biological cellular systems, that the systems can grow by multiple copies of a unit system, where a unit system is defined by structures which constrain the system spatially and possibly temporally. And the system has many copies of the unit system, and that's how it grows. When some unit system get disbanded, other unit systems get generated. Finally, is it true that questioning the identity of a referential communication cluster leads to the formation of the corresponding communication system? And this is what we said. So questioning the identity of this communication cluster, whether it has its own specific rules, whether it stands out from its environment. This leads to the formation of the corresponding communication system. Of course, if the questioning comes with the answer of no, there is no identity of this communication cluster, then there is no system formed. However, by questioning the identity, that is the first step which leads to the generation of large volume of cross-referencing communications, which leads potentially to the formation of the corresponding new system. Thank you.